Welcome back to Independent Blazers. I am Dan.
And I am Joe.
And today, we're going to do a response video to a response video.
Right.
About Rationality Rules, contradicting Ben Shapiro and some others, about Judeo-Christian values influencing Western culture. Joe and I have debated amongst ourselves about this one. And before we get into it,
folks, before we get into the video and our thoughts, we'd like you to please like, subscribe, share, bang the notification button. It helps the algorithm, it helps us, and it helps you. Please share with your family and friends. And also, folks, for bonus coverage, please follow us on X, formerly known as Twitter, for live discussion, opinion pieces, and in the future, I'm sure we'll expand on X even more. And please let us know what you think of the videos. Please comment, just be respectful. And Dan, what do we got today?
Full screen, please.
One of the most prominent and pernicious claims that theists, and indeed some atheists, are currently making is that Western civilization is based on Judeo-Christian values.
The values that resonate most with human beings are eternal, not changeable, and not relativistic. They are universal. They are not group-specific. And most of all, they apply to individual human beings, not group labels. And those values were first embedded clearly and concisely in the Ten Commandments.
Our foundational principles, certainly in Western culture, come from Christianity.
Judeo-Christian values are predicated on the existence of a God of morality. The entire Western world, what we call Western civilization, is based on this understanding.
To make a rational argument, you have to start with an initial proposition. Well, the proposition that underlies Western culture is that there's a transcendent morality.
European and American culture, which is based on Judeo-Christian values, is better than other cultures. I think it's uncontroversial to say so.
That was the basic foundation of America. It was a Judeo-Christian ethic. It was a Judeo-Christian reasoning.
The Catholic Church built Western civilization.
Western civilization at large was built upon Christianity. That's a fact.
And yet, this claim is absolute nonsense. And what's worse, it's often not even an argument. It's just an assertion, a statement that straight out ignores history and science. This is Western civilization is based on Judeo-Christian values. Debunked. Now, it tends to be quite easy to take on this claim because, as just said, that's often all it is, a claim.
Can you turn it up, please?
It tends to merely require a swift motion from Hitchens' razor. That which can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. But in the few cases in which an argument is actually given, it tends to be in reference to morality, which in effect is the assertion that Western morality is based on the assumption that the Abrahamic God exists.
Most people in this room act out a Judeo-Christian ethic.
Judeo-Christian values are predicated on the existence of a God
Hey, guys,
of
can you
morality.
pause for a sec?
The entire Western world.
I'm hearing background noise. It's too distorted.
I'm not.
Guys, you can't hear any background noise? It's not coming from you?
No.
I can hear the background noise more than I can hear the video. So anyway, okay, go on, carry on.
What we call Western civilization is based on this understanding.
Our foundational principles, certainly in Western culture, come from Christianity.
I'm arguing that the ethic that drives our culture is predicated on the idea of God.
Now, the first thing to be said about most of those who make this assertion is that they are utterly ignoring history before Judaism. And in doing so, they're just expecting us to assume that before its inception, people somehow didn't know that it's wrong to kill, exploit, and steal. That before the Ten Commandments, life was nasty, brutish, and short. But this simply isn't true. Evidence shows...
That was a quote from Thomas Hobbes. Life is nasty, brutish, and short. And as for the part about not knowing, it's something I've questioned Christians on. Okay, according to the Bible, when Cain kills Abel, he apparently did wrong, but did Yahweh actually tell Cain it was immoral to kill, or he just expected him to know?
that official laws against murder and theft date back at least 4,400 years to Lagash, Mesopotamia, which of course is 600 years before the birth of Judaism, and that official laws abolishing slavery only date back 200 years, which of course is 3,600 years after Judaism. But since these facts don't fit the Judeo-Christian narrative, let's just ignore them, right? I mean, it's not like Abrahamic religion hasn't ignored and still ignores facts and contradictions, is it?
Those values were first embedded clearly in.
All right. He's leaving a few things out so far. Look, it's not to debate whether Christianity is true or not. But let's take, for example, America, okay? A lot of founding fathers, for example, were maybe weren't believers, but they respected it in their private writings, okay?
Yeah, they're both like deists. They're what we call deists.
Right. George Washington had a massive respect for it. The Constitution was a major influence behind the U.S. Constitution. He was a believer, had a respect. Now, whether Christianity is true or not is a whole other debate. But when they made a printing press, the first one, it was to get the Bible out into the hands of people.
Yeah, that's right.
And again, I'm not talking about if you're an atheist or this or that, but to say it didn't have any influence so far, it's yeah. We're not talking about whether the Bible's real or not, but to say that in Western culture, in Europe and America, didn't have any influence. That private writings, the history itself, even if you go in the U.S. to the Library of Congress, is just simply not true.
Okay, let's see. Alex, shall we continue, or do you want more? Say something more.
No.
Okay.
Concisely in the Ten Commandments.
Or to put this all another way, most of those who make this assertion just expect us to believe that an evolved social species somehow didn't evolve social norms, that despite all of the evidence telling us otherwise, such as the fact that wolves, elephants, chimpanzees, rats, bats, and whales have all been proven to exhibit moral behavior, humans for some reason require divine intervention. You know, I think it's worth me doubling down here, because for whatever reason, many seem to have a hard time understanding how human morality could have emerged naturally, when it's really quite simple. We are sentient beings that have evolved the capacity to feel pain and the desire to avoid it, and our recognition that the best way to achieve this is by cooperating and establishing rules is morality. It's that simple. Morality isn't this mysterious, unfathomable thing. The religious just need it to be. Because, to paraphrase the founding father and second US President John Adams, mystery is a convenient excuse for absurdity. Anyhow, with the question of where do moral values come from answered, I'm convinced that the best way to succinctly address the primary assertion is to first identify Western values, and to then trace back when, where, and why they emerged. And so, let's start with freedom of speech, the very bedrock of a free society, and the right that allows us to enact and defend all other rights. Is this Western value of Judeo-Christian origin? No. Both the Old and New Testament proclaim.
Well, I was going to say that was just it. The Bible does not. Neither Old nor New Testament encourages freedom of speech. In fact, they discourage it. And that's part of Western values that I believe in. Freedom of speech and freedom of religion. But go on.
Well, look, I'm not going to get into every verse and debate the context. Both things can be true. Again, I can point to Western philosophers and founding fathers. They had a respect. They weren't telling people you have to believe in Christianity, but they had a respect for the Judeo-Christian philosophy. Yeah, so and again, if you want to go whole Western civilization or founding of America, look, both things can be true. He's making good points here, but to say that it doesn't have any influence, you can just read some of the founders, even the Magna Carta and the private authors. It was an influence. There was some influence there. Both things can be true. I'm not saying he's not making good points. Both things can be true.
Right. But free speech, though, that's something else, though. Free speech. Come on, the Bible does not encourage free speech.
A debate that Leviticus was talking about laws, and Leviticus, my friend, was strictly referring to Israel. It wasn't even referring to the United States. But again, we're talking. What kind of values are we talking? Are we talking just about the Ten Commandments? Are we talking about sexual morality?
Yeah.
What are we
talking? The New Testament. The New Testament as well.
Well, again, I'm not dude. I'm not going to get in a biblical debate with you, but he's painting a broad picture. Both things can be true. Go read some of the founding fathers' private writings and see look at George Washington's first congressional address, and you tell me if there's no influence in there.
Okay.
Strict limitations on free speech through primarily blasphemy laws, and until very recently, Jewish and Christian governments declared exactly the same. Hell, the Inquisition is the antithesis of free speech, as they literally incinerated anyone who didn't share their barbaric, unenlightened beliefs. So far as evidence indicates, the principle of free speech and expression dates back 2,500 years to ancient Athens and the Roman Republic. But true freedom of speech didn't emerge until the early Enlightenment, 1689, with first the British Bill of Rights and shortly after the French Revolution, 3,500 years after Judaism and 1,700 years after Christianity. Moving on.
ช้อปปี้11ลดใหญ่มากช็อปดิวปังลดสูงสุด 80% ซื้อเลยที่นมฟอร์มอสอร่อยที่หนึ่งของพวกเรา
What about liberty? You know, the abolition of slavery, and with it the pursuit of happiness. Did this value that so characterizes the West come from Judaism or Christianity? Again, no. The Old and New Testament both explicitly endorse slavery and in fact provide rules and regulations for several categories of slaves, regulations that both Jews and Christians enacted and upheld during the vast majority of their time in power. The truth of the matter is that the principle of liberty dates back, again, 2,500 years to Athens, when the lawgiver Solon abolished debt slavery and freed all Athenian citizens who had formerly been enslaved. But true abolition of slavery didn't occur until the 19th century, 3,600 years after Judaism and 1,800 years after Christianity. Now, some, such as Theo Hobson, would argue that since Christianity dominated the West during this time, the abolition of slavery...
Yeah, that's something else. I'd ask people... I'd say I ask people why they think slavery is illegal, is wrong. Morally wrong. A lot of people today will say, yeah, the Bible, Christian values, like, no, look in the Bible. The Bible never condemned slavery, believe it or not. And they're like, how can that not? They said the people who abolished slavery were Christians. I said, yeah, and so are the people who are trying to preserve it. And I've asked Christians this. I said, okay, let me ask you. The fact that the Bible doesn't say slavery is wrong, did they not know it then? Or was it okay then? It's just not okay now. See, I believe slavery is objectively wrong to own another human being. Another human being like myself as property, I think that is objectively wrong.
Well, again, we're talking about influence, like it or not. I'm not even saying he's not making good points. Let me make this clear to you. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Did Christianity and Judaism have any influence? That's the question. Let's get it through here. The answer is yes, it did. Now, both things can be true. When he's saying there is some truth there. But to say like, oh, it didn't have any, he's making it sound like it didn't have any influence. It did.
Sure, but I also think it was more of a stepping stone they built upon because, like you were saying, the printing press of Johannes Gutenberg, that was his name, right? Or
I think so, yeah.
Now and Martin Luther, not Martin Luther King, Martin Luther, he wanted the Bible to mass produced so that people could read it on their own. But his intentions weren't exactly met, because as people became more literate, they became more involved in critically thinking. And so they started to believe their own way. They started becoming, it led to the scientific revolution and the Enlightenment era, which is where my values come from, are from both the scientific revolution and the Enlightenment era, meaning my values are based on empiricism, science, logic, and reason.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that, except for the fact that he's making good points. All I'm simply trying to say is, I'm telling you, like it or not, the Bible did have some early influence. It did. Judaism had influence. That's what we're talking about. He's acting like it didn't have any, which is untrue. Even non-believers respected it early on. Now, maybe we're talking today, maybe not. And again, both things can be true.
Okay.
Okay, well, I guess so. It is.
Was and still is rooted in Judeo-Christian values. But this is as fallacious as asserting that since animal rights first emerged in Hindu culture, therefore animal rights was and still is rooted in Hindu values. It's a type of false cause fallacy. Okay, well, what about democracy? The ability to elect and, more importantly, remove our leaders. Surely the West inherited this moral from Judeo-Christian values, right? Again, no. Absolutely not. Both the Old and New Testament explicitly endorse.
Now, at that point, he's right. The Bible wasn't talking about democracy. See, like I said, both things can be true. Some things were influenced by, but democracy is not it was not a biblical principle. All right, dude, listen up for a second.
Okay.
If you study particularly the Old Testament, there were monarchies, kings. Israel had kings. Yes, the Bible to Christians is considered a spiritual book. Yes, some things it had an influence, particularly early on, probably in Europe or England. I stick with it in America. They had a respect for it, whether they believed it or not. This, we're not talking about whether it's true or whether you believe it's true or not. We're talking about that it have any influence. Yes, he is right on that point there. The Bible's not talking about democracy. It's not.
Right. The Greek gave us democracy, not the Bible.
And my argument here is, or my point is, both things can be true. I mean, to say it didn't, he's saying it didn't have any influence. It sounds like he's saying, no, there was people that respected it, even the ones that privately didn't believe it.
Theocracy, which is a system of government in which one or more people rule in the name of a god or gods. And, surprise, surprise, throughout history, Judaism and Christianity have enforced such a government. For example, in medieval Europe, in which Judeo-Christian values absolutely dominated, the monarch could do whatever they wanted to whoever they wanted without justification, because he had the divine right of kings. The principle of democracy can be traced back, again, 2,500 years to Athens, when Cleisthenes formed their constitution so that randomly selected citizens could assume administrative and judicial offices. However, it wasn't perfect, as citizenship excluded women, slaves, foreigners, non-landowners, and men under the age of 20. Unfortunately, as just mentioned, the principle was buried during medieval Europe, but it saw a significant resurgence in the 18th century due to Enlightenment values, and true democracy, as in all citizens who are mentally capable above the age of 18 being able to vote, was finally established in the 20th century, 3,700 years after Judaism and 1,900 years after Christianity. And while we're on the topic of suffrage, what about equality in general? You know, equal opportunity for all
This one.
ethnicities, all sexes, all classes, all ages, and all sexual preferences. Was this beacon of freedom and equality a gift from Judaism or Christianity? Again, no. Judeo-Christian edicts fervently oppose such equality, demanding the subordination of women, the execution of homosexuals, and, as already mentioned, the endorsement of slavery and the execution of blasphemers. And so, again, it's no surprise that medieval Europe embodied precisely just that. Now, I could go on by tracing back the foundation of all Western values and practices, such as Easter and Christmas, which are both pagan festivals that have been appropriated by Christianity. But I think I've more than made my point. Western civilization did not emerge from Judeo-Christian values. It emerged despite them. Western civilization was conceived in ancient Athens, and it most flourished during the Age of Enlightenment in direct opposition to Judeo-Christian values. Now, don't get me wrong, I appreciate and acknowledge that many Jews and Christians played a significant role in shaping Western morality, but they didn't do so because of Judeo-Christian values. They did so because of their own...
That's my point. He just made my point right there. Okay. My point is, both things can be true.
Okay. Now I understand, yeah. Okay.
Go ahead.
Moral conscience, which they then projected onto their religion. And that's why, not surprisingly, absolute divine laws are forever changing. Now, just before I wrap up, and on a completely different note, I've got a question for you all. Would you possibly be interested in a card game in which the purpose is to debunk theistic arguments by playing the right fallacies, or while preventing your opponent from doing the same by playing cards such as "That's Just a Theory"? If so, please let me know, because I have a great game mechanic in mind, an awesome art direction, and I'd simply love to kickstart the project. Anyhow, as always, thank you kindly for the view, and an extra special thank you to my wonderful...
All right. Well, I think I said all there is to say on my part. Joe, how did you find the video?
And again, I'm not trying to debunk the guy totally. He does say some truth. But my only point is, there was influence. There was people that respected Judeo-Christian values. What he was saying about democracy, 100% true. How it was formed and how quality evolved. It took years upon the centuries to evolve. Look, I'm not saying he's wrong, but what I'm saying is both things can be true. That's my simple point.
All right. But here, then again, here we got a question here. What did the Western world get from the Bible? Any example? Is a question I just got.
All right. Well, I would say, let me just use the United States as an example. You see a lot of state capitals, the Ten Commandments. I'll say this. Listen, Mr. Condescending. With your facial expressions. Well, let me give you one. What about, it wasn't for religion, we wouldn't have America, would we? Yes or no?
Probably not.
Or so,
Probably not. No, you're right. The Puritans wouldn't have come over.
Was that influence? Yes or no?
Yes, it was.
Okay. Also, like I'm saying, Dan, you have good points. You are right. In a search, all I'm saying is, it seems like he's trying to brush aside. And you notice at the end of the video, to cover himself, he puts that little blurb in there where he says, well, yeah, I do appreciate some Judeo-Christian. That's all I'm saying. He's intelligent.
Yeah,
he makes good points.
You're right, he does. And by the way, I'm sorry that I gave that look. What I meant to say, I'll tell you why I was giving that look. I didn't mean to be condescending there. I meant what was in my head was the idea of 10 Commandments being on government property.
Right.
When church said it's supposed to be separate. That's why I gave the look. I wasn't trying to put you down or anything like that.
The point is, the video is, did it influence? Is an influence there? Now, church and state, yeah, that is a point. It's valid. We're talking about influence. And remember the video? He's talking about Judeo and Christian, how a lot of people say the West is, Judeo and Christian influence. And his argument is basically saying, not really. And I'm saying both things can be true. In some areas, there's a massive influence. Our country from the Puritans. We have a country we come from. Because why? What did the Puritans do? They wanted to worship freely. That's an influence. Their religion influenced them to leave England. And
yeah, same with the Quakers. The Quakers as well. But then I think America.
And then the guy made some great points in there. I'm not trying to say that. What I'm saying is he made some great points, but there should be some context in there too. And at the end, he puts the little blurb to cover himself, is what I'm saying. Because for a case for, he says, oh yeah, I do respect some Judeo. You notice he does that at the end. And again, people can believe what they want. They can believe what they want.
They can. I mean, we also have to take into account some things about our culture, as an American culture was influenced by paganism as well from Europe.
110%. Absolutely.
This is how secular I grew up. I did not know Christmas was a religious holiday until I was 8. I'd sang Christmas songs in school, not thinking about the meaning of it, but I associated the Christmas tree, Santa Claus, the reindeer, presents. That's what I thought of when I thought of Christmas as a kid.
Well, Christmas, a lot of early Christians hated Christmas. They were against it. And,
it was a Catholic holiday.
It was Ulysses Grant signed it into a federal holiday. Over time, it got commercialized, and that's a good discussion for another day. Yeah, early settlers were against it.
Yeah, that's correct. It was a Catholic holiday. It was outlawed. Yeah.
So again, everyone can have their opinion or have their. And like I said, I will tell the viewers this. I've repeated myself a few times. I don't want them to get the wrong impression. The gentleman made some good points, especially on democracy. Yes, the Bible he's correct. It does not really address slavery. It tells you in the New Testament when Philemon was a slave and the Apostle Paul basically treat the guy well, basically say take care of him, treat him humanely. It doesn't say, hey, get rid, end it. That is a point. That's a good point in this part. I'm not trying to say that what he's saying and what you're saying is not true, but all I'm saying is don't brush aside. There are some elements where Judeo-Christian values have influenced the West.
All right. Again, and I want to say the reason why I see it as a stepping stone was because for a long time, the Quakers and the Puritans, they were at odds with each other.
True.
Even though they were reading the same book.
Absolutely.
And often, and the fact that a number of Quakers were hanged in Puritan town and in the Puritan areas. And I think that's what built people up to say, wait a minute, these guys are reading the same book, and yet they're coming to different conclusions and calling the other a blasphemer. And so they say, we got to do better than this.
The other deal is, if you want to go, particularly in America, really, religion really wasn't protected freedom of it until 1839. So, So, really, they really protected it. So that's when hopefully a lot of the persecutions and killings, slowed down at least to stop. So over time, again, the guy makes some good points. It did evolve over time. And again, like England and the Magna Carta, I'm not an expert on it. I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on their. I'm
not either.
But there was influence in England early on. They did have. It slips my mind right now, folks, but there was a gentleman. There was a movie made about. As a matter of fact, the man who spoke out against slavery thought it was
Wilberforce. The movie was Amazing Grace. Yeah, and it was about Wilberforce, I think. But that I hate to say it though, but slavery was ended in Britain by Britain for economical reasons, but they made it look like moral reasons, just like today, when one country will take another, regardless of which country it is. They use morality. They're not upfront by saying, yeah, we want resources. This is just more financially convenient. So the Industrial Revolution played a big role at the end of slavery, especially the transatlantic. So, because people, again, it was also people who were Christians who were trying to keep slavery. So I saw the movie. Amazing Grace about Wilberforce.
Absolutely. And again, these people are far from perfect. And my point is sometimes both things can be true. What he said was very factual. but also when we talk about early leaders in Western civilization, particularly I'm most familiar with American history, the founding fathers did have a respect for it. A lot of them did. You can read George Washington, you can read some of Thomas Jefferson's writings. And so there was some early political speeches. So this gives us something to keep in mind.
Yeah. There's there's plenty of more room for debate on this one. I'd like to debate it again in another video.
Yeah, for sure.
Got anything to add, Joe?
No, I'm good. Just thanks for watching. This channel is designed for lively debate, so this is what we do. We plan on doing.
And Joe and I do sometimes have conversations like this in private as well. This is why we thought we'd bring it here to social media to get other people's opinions on it. But folks, in the meantime, please like, subscribe, share, bang the notification bell, as it helps us and hopefully it helps you too. And also, please follow us on X, formerly known as Twitter. Anything else, Joe?
Nah, hey, folks, wherever you're at in the world, have a great night, great day, wherever you're at.
And grab your independent mind and blade.
Have a great one, folks.